1497. The Portuguese are ready for more. Vasco da Gama had just returned from India via the sea route around the Cape of Good Hope. King Manuel I wants to send another fleet. This time, a massive armada. 6 ships and 2,000 men, both to find gold and spread the word of God. But how do you get thousands of men across the ocean for weeks on end without them killing each other? So it's no wonder that when the Portuguese started exploring Africa and the Americas, they didn't realize how harsh the oceans could be. Most died during the voyage, either due to starvation, exposure, disease, or mutiny. These were made of hemp or wool. They hung from hooks bolted to the gunwale, or gunwale, on smaller ships like the ones depicted in our video. Sailors slept right on the deck, under the open sky. They lay down in shifts. Each watch had to keep one eye open at all times in case the lookout shouted "Land ahoy" or "Sail ho." It was relentless and inescapable. There was no shade, no respite. They attached themselves to the hull of a ship and bore holes into the wood. But what was good? Leave me a comment. Would you rather live on land or at sea? Thanks for watching. Matt? Remember, don't be a jerk. Be nice to each other. Check out our new series. See you later. These wormholes make the ship more susceptible to leaks, and leaks meant extra work for the sailors. They patched up holes with resin and sawdust. They caulked seams with oakum and moss. They tightened rivets and replaced planks. It was back-breaking work, especially when the ship ran into storms and the waves knocked loose what they had just repaired. The sun cracked their skin, blistered their bodies, and cooked their eyes. Then there were the cold days when frigid winds cut across the deck. Sailors huddled together for warmth, wrapped in whatever oilskins they could find. Evenings were cold. On the equator, mornings were hot. The temperature changed daily. The further north or south they went, the colder it got. Sometimes the ocean sprayed cold water on the deck. There were times it was so hot that the tar on the masts melted, dripping onto sailors below. A sleeping sailor might miss the signs and run right past the opportunity to explore a new land. Plus, being asleep meant you weren't paying attention to the ropes, pulleys, masts, and booms flying around. You just had to trust the guy next to you. If that sounds uncomfortable, try lying down on a wet, swaying deck full of rope and wood shavings. Now throw in a few rats and cockroaches and you have yourself a night's rest. Tropical ulcers were common. They festered and spread bacteria throughout the body. Blood poisoning set in, and gangrene often followed. It was in the rats, it was in the air, it was in the water. There was no escaping it. Maybe someone spilled your grog. Maybe you got in a card game. Whatever the reason, one wrong word, and a sailor was likely to draw his sword. Mutiny was common, especially if the ship ran low on supplies. And like any group of people living so close together, arguments happened. Maybe someone was jealous of your girlfriend. Fights broke out at sea and there were casualties. Sometimes entire crews rose up against their captains. Crew members were desperate and violent. They pillaged what they wanted. Often the captain and officers were killed. The Portuguese fought the Dutch, the Spanish fought the English. And all the while the sailors from these ships fought with each other. And when they weren't killing each other, they were fighting other sailors from other ships. Piracy was common. Typhoid, fever, dysentery, tuberculosis, influenza, cholera. Any ship that came too close was fair game. Supplies were low and everyone was desperate. A ship might have enough biscuits to feed its crew for 1 week. For a pirate, that was a feast. For example, the bubonic plague hit England in 1498, the same year that Vasco da Gama reached India. This deadly disease killed millions. Smallpox was prevalent. The sailors carried them all and passed them around like Christmas cards. Anything a person could catch, a sailor could catch, and the isolation meant there was no help available. There was no quarantine, no sick leave. A sick sailor stayed on board, continued working, and died. If he was lucky, he was thrown into the sea. If not, he stayed on board and his rotting body added to the stench of the ship. Once the flesh began to blacken, there was nothing the crew could do. They amputated the affected limb, but sometimes the fever took the whole body. Scurvy was widespread among sailors. This was due to a lack of vitamin C. Symptoms included bleeding gums, loose teeth, and eventually the death of bodily tissues. With no treatment, a sailor was lucky if he survived more than one voyage. The Atlantic Ocean claimed many lives. Storms tossed ships like driftwood. Waves crashed over the decks, pulling men into the churning waters below. Others fell overboard trying to adjust the sails or repair the rigging. Sudden squalls could appear out of nowhere, dropping anchors into the sea, leaving sailors stranded and drenched. Many were lost forever, but others were picked up by sharks. If a man was bitten by a shark, his chances of survival were slim. Sharks didn't usually eat them, but they left them with massive wounds that would almost certainly become infected. Ships were small, poorly built by today's standards. They had square-rigged sails that were heavy and thick. The winds tore them to shreds. Storms could toss ships like bath toys. Sailors experienced typhoons in the Indian Ocean and hurricanes in the Caribbean. Then there was the monotony of it all. Days blurred together, all sky and sea. The sweat that caused their skin to split would heal faster if left alone. There was no way to tell where you were, which direction you were going, or how far you had come. Sailors were constantly fighting waves, winds, rain, sunburn, and cold. Let's find out. Welcome to my channel. It's me. And let us get to those filthy facts about what sucked to be a sailor in the age of exploration. Fact no one, they stunk. To put it bluntly, sailors smelled terrible. We already know that they didn't wash. So it's no surprise. But there was a reason behind it. They pickled vegetables and fruit, dried meat, smoked sausage, and made soups. If they washed, the open sores would become infected. Add to this that the ocean air quickly turned fresh water into salty, undrinkable water. Seawater leaches salt from the body, making you hungry all the time. But eating wasn't a treat. The result was an accumulation of dirt, sweat, dead skin, waste, and stale urine. If there was such a thing as an anti-scent at the time, they would have bottled it and called it cologne. No. 2. There was zero privacy. If you had to go to the bathroom, you just did. There was no privacy on a ship, none whatsoever. But rotten meat and weevils, the reality was a bit more varied than that. They did, however, have recipes for fish. Portugal enjoys a Mediterranean climate, sunny and warm most of the year. Of course, water had to be boiled first because of all the things floating in it. We have recipes for boiled beef with chickpeas, boiled pork shoulder with cabbage, stewed goat with rice, even roast pig. But who had the appetite for all this? Sailors got 1/2 pound of bread a day, 1/2 pound of wine, 2 ounces of oil, 2 slices of bacon, a little pepper, a little vinegar, 6 ounces of wheat, and a little beer. We said earlier that sailors got sunburned, but it's worth expanding on. Shipworms are mollusks that grow up to 18 inches long. The sun beat down on sailors relentlessly. That equals 138 calories. They were burning 2,600 calories a day. If a man needed to use the head, he went over the side of the ship. And while he was hanging over the side of the ship, he might have been able to pick up some guano to fertilize the meager plants growing in a barrel of water. In fact, a good sailor would bring along seeds so that he could grow sprouts to add some variety to his meals. Number 3, food was scarce. And while we may think of the food on these ships as nothing, no, for the weather was unforgiving. Number 5, life expectancy was short. For every sailor that came back from a voyage, 3 or 4 didn't. Number 6, sleep was uncomfortable. Where did the sailors sleep? Some ships, depending on the size, had cabins with hammocks. Number 7, there was disease. Disease was everywhere. Number 8, pirates attacked. Not every sailor was a Portuguese sailor. Some were Spanish, French, Dutch, or English. Number 9, they were exposed to the elements. Number 10, they were shipworms. Alright guys, that's what it sucked to be a sailor in the age of exploration.